Right. Good morning, members. It's gone 10:30. So welcome to the March meeting of the Children, Young People and Lifelong Learning Committee. This is the, obviously, as everyone knows, the final meeting of this the SIPL committee in this round of the council. Lucy, do you want to take us through the Sederunt and apologies?
Good morning, everyone. We have 21 members present. We are quorate. And so far, I have received apologies from Councillor Diggle and Robert Fritchley-Simpson. Not present are Councillor Ian Crothers, Councillor Karen Crothers, Councillor Hislop, Robert McQuiston, and Elaine Dennis. Maybe along later in the meeting.
Thanks, Lucy. Just to remind people that, or members, that this meeting will be recorded and will be made available to the public for listening purposes. So can we move to item 3, the minute of the meeting of 3rd of February 2017. Can we agree? Yep. Just on the back of that minute, item 6, the Dumfries Learning Town project update, the bridge. The director's informed me that he's going up to Glasgow next Thursday to sign the agreement, and we should start construction, I think, shortly afterwards. I noticed that the site is currently being cleared, so we're pleased about the progress which we've made on that particular aspect and on phase 1 of the Dumfries Learning Town altogether. So can I just thank everyone who's been involved in development. That has been a huge piece of work for all their efforts to put in. That's all the officials, the parents, the teachers, and the pupils in terms of pushing that forward. Okay. So if we can move to item 4, the pupil equity funding local guidelines. That starts on page 7. I think it's Julian who's speaking to this. Julian, is there anything you want to add to the paper? You'll also see that there's an additional appendix effectively being distributed to everyone, which gives the allocations for each of the schools. So I appreciate that members would be interested in that. Gillian?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. There are both local and national guidelines appended, and a copy of the public information of the school-by-school breakdown has been circulated, as the Chair highlighted. Just to clarify, the dash, there are dashes and stars. The dashes refer to where there is no child eligible. The stars refer to where there is a very small amount of money has been identified for the school, and for reasons of confidentiality, that exact figure has not been circulated. So there's a difference. So if there are less than 3 children with 3 school meals, then the exact amount has not been stipulated on the public website. But in total, Dumfries and Galloway Council will benefit from 2.8 million going directly to the schools. What I've tried to put forward within this paper is that money does not come without significant scrutiny, and the accountability and scrutiny of that fund falls to the Education Authority and therefore falls to our directorate. So getting the balance and the shift of responsibility is new for us, and it will be quite a significant workload over the period until June to have these school improvement plans submitted. But I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay. Sorry, Gail.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points. I think the word equity is ridiculous because it's not terribly equitable, but anyway, I'll leave that sitting there. Staffing, if the school chose to get a member of existing staff to do a job because they know that they're very capable of doing that, and then needed to backfill, would they have the opportunity to do that? And secondly, who's paying for the attainment advisors?
Education Scotland are paying for the attainment advisors, and the schools can spend their money on staff with our agreement in terms of what they've told us the impact of those staff are going to be, but it would be their responsibility to arrange the backfill. The core principle of this is additionality and not substitution, so they cannot use this funding for something that already is core business for the school.
Ted?
Thank you, Chair. It's my understanding that this funding is for 1 year. Is there any reason for that, and what kind of difficulties might that create in staffing?
Thank you. That question has been raised on a number of occasions. We understand now that this funding is for 1 year, although there has been a commitment made verbally for funding over the parliamentary cycle. Head teachers are concerned that if they make appointments, they can only make appointments because the funding is only guaranteed for that year.
Come back, Ted.
So you're saying that there is an expectation that this funding would continue through the parliamentary term?
That is what has been relayed verbally to us, but I think the head teachers are slightly concerned in making appointments for staff, because if that changes, the schools will be left with that staffing budget pressure.
I mean, it's nice that there is an expectation there, and it's also excellent that you're advising head teachers that, these appointments are for 1 year only, because, we had expectations that capital funding was going to be received by the council this year, and that expectation hasn't been fulfilled. So you're very wise in doing that. Thank you.
Jim McCall.
Thanks, Chair. Have all parents been informed of the importance of having their children registered for free meals?
Yes, we've always taken that responsibility very seriously. However, I think with the money going directly to schools, schools particularly have taken a keen interest in making sure that that's happened more recently.
Nick.
Thanks, Chair. Obviously, it's quite strange that as we're doing the scrutiny of how the money's been spent, why the money wasn't devolved to us to spend and oversee. So that's a bit strange. Obviously, there's more resources required at the centre to deal with this. Are we getting any cash for that? Obviously, there's a concern also for the schools that the bureaucracy involved. How much time is this taking at the schools to deliver? It's a sort of different system, isn't it?
Yes, so 2 points to that, if I may. We have tried very hard to incorporate the reporting procedures within our existing procedures, because we recognise this is a workload for schools. It's £2.8 million that they will be directly responsible for, and HMI will be looking for impact as part of what they are referring to as the pupil equity footprint. So they will be looking specifically as how these schools have spent the cash. We are not receiving any additional funding to the centre in order to manage the accountability of that, but we will have to look at what we do and the level of support we can give the schools. But it's very important to us that the schools, we made a statement at early doors that we would not top slice this funding. It's going directly to the schools, and we will manage the additional workload in the centre through management of resources.
George.
Firstly, I would welcome the money, because any money's welcome in the current situation. Secondly, there's an inference, it's quite a strong inference, that although the head teachers will have a great deal of autonomy in how we use this money, there's also an inference that there's an encouragement to work together. So I'm wondering how you could facilitate that, because it would be very easy for schools to, this is my priority, but to get a larger outcome, I would suggest if schools work together to maximise the money, that would be really, really, in a longer term, there'd be a longer benefit. And a second query I have is, this is for identifying the needs of closing the attainment gap and deprivation, but it also says that there shouldn't be a stigma. And there again, there's a subtlety of that's really quite important, that the attainment gap is not always about poverty, it's about other things, and that might be a way to overcome the stigma of identifying just the poorer children, if you like, so that there's a broader, more holistic use of this money. I'm just wondering, because it is short term, so the focus is going to have to be very, very quick and holistic. So I just wondered what your opinion on that.
Thank you. There's, again, key challenges there. head teachers have to make decisions very quickly on how they're going to spend this money. And as you can see on page 12, we've identified that one of the key roles of the local authority is to facilitate collaborative approaches and support schools in their decision making. But that's ultimately, it is for the schools to decide. We can support, we can guide, we can facilitate, we can advise, but we cannot control because the money is theirs, but we are responsible and accountable for the scrutiny. So it is an interesting shift in balance. The money also has to be spent as close to the child as possible, but yet without stigma. So that's quite an interesting balance for people to work through. So there are some tensions within this, but as you say, it's funding coming into the authority, and I'm sure with the skills of our head teachers, we will make good use of it.
Just to have a quick follow-up there. Again, it's short notice, but I think there will be a place for parent councils and also pupils to be heavily involved with this. And again, it's short notice, so I think school councils should be really aware of this and work closely with their head teachers and other schools for that matter.
Colin?
All I wanted to add to what Gillian said is it's important to recognise, I think, that we are as well placed probably as any authority for this to be dealt with because of the history over the last 7-8 years around collaboration. That's been a key strategy that we've had: innovation, collaboration, local decision making. So our head teachers are probably in a place where they're well used to working with others, well used to working within their cluster, which has made us quite confident, I think, that they won't spend money wastefully and that they will work together to maximise the impact. So, and I think it's worth saying that because it has placed us well, I think.
Willie?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I heard Gillian speaking there about its additionality and not for stuff that's core service within the authority. How do we stand in terms of, and Gail referred to pupil equity, and I would argue likewise, then in terms of the kids who need the extra support, there really, when reading this document, there will not be much equity for them in reaching achievement and so forth. But is there enough scope within this to deal with the additional support for learning, where schools out there, and I know a number west of the region, I'm sure they're the same throughout the region, 5,000 kids needing additional support for learning. Can some of this money be put towards where there is difficulty in terms of providing for those kids who need it the most, in terms of additional support for learning, where schools are actually struggling just now with this ASL?
Thank you. Absolutely, Councillor. And you can see from page 16 that we've identified a list of staff, just as a ready reckoner, really, to help schools identify what they could buy for their money. And I know that's a little bit blunt, but if they're receiving £80,000, what does that mean in terms of staffing? And then they can make the best decisions that they can for their pupils and for the schools.
Andy?
Thanks, Chair. I'm just referring to page 17 of the papers, and bullet point 5 and bullet point 6 of the key principles. Parents, carers, children, young people, and other key stakeholders should be involved in the planning process. That's at the centre of the thing. And 6, more importantly, funding must provide targeted support for children and young people affected by poverty to achieve their full potential. Although the equity fund is allocated on the basis of free school meal eligibility, head teachers can use their professional judgment, and that is the important part, to bring additional children into the targeted interventions. So if the head teacher and the staff identify a problem with a specific child who may not be in free school meals, they can use this money to help support that child. That's my understanding of it.
Yes, absolutely. And it is about professional judgment, and I think that's a key principle of this. But it does bring some challenges. I know in England there has been some discussion about the role of parents and carers. Because this funding has been identified publicly, some parents and carers know that their child might have brought £1,200 into the school and ask things like, what are you doing with my money? What is my child getting for my money? So we're trying to move away from any discussion around that. It is for the school community for targeted interventions.
Colin?
Thank you, Chair. It was more or less on the same point. I just wonder why we complicate this thing by poverty-related attainment gap and then, as Andy pointed out in the bullet point, that the head teacher can use their professional judgment, etc. I mean, why is it not just for all children who are not attaining a level, but to me it seems it's the ones that obviously are getting school meals who are going to get the most attention in this, but there may well be other children there that are not getting school meals, but it's got to be down to the head teacher's discretion. Why are they not just automatically everyone that's not attaining be in the same pool, rather than school meal kids getting the sort of first bite at the cherry, and then the other kids who are down to the headmaster, you know, getting brought in if need be. It should be for everyone and not excluding anybody right from the get-go.
I think you'll see in practice that's exactly what will happen, and that the overall, all the children will be tracked, they'll be monitored, the attainment of all children will be looked at and scrutinised. And again, it comes down to the point about professional judgment. The government gave us the funding on these criteria, and they will be looking for the impact of the spend on these criteria. But in reality, the head teachers will make good judgments. I'm confident of that.
Gail?
Thank you for letting me back in, Chair. Just a couple of other points. I'm aware that head teachers were, I suppose, what you might call three-line whipped in meeting in Ayr about a month ago to discuss the implementation of this. Have you had any feedback from the head teachers as to how they feel about how it's going to progress forward, and any sort of diktats that they're not as comfortable with? And secondly, what's the communicator? Because I quite like to apply at £14 an hour.
Gillian?
Thank you. We certainly did not apply a three-line whip, but the general. Again, our head teachers do work collaboratively. They tended to go up in clusters, in that one or two would go and bring key messages back. Feedback was, as the director highlighted, that they were fairly comfortable with the direction of travel because it is actually the way we've been working for some time. They were more concerned about the level of scrutiny in terms of inspection, how that would bring about change, and they were slightly concerned about the timescales for the school improvement plan, because this is in keeping with the new Act, which brings in new duties as from June and September. So for me, this is not really about the spend, because I'm confident we can spend that, but there are very significant new duties in terms of reporting of school improvement planning. It is a visual and hearing.
Dennis?
Yeah, I'm just hoping I've picked this up right, Chair. And what we're saying is that the funding has followed the child that needs the help and the child on free school meals, the schools. Therefore, if that is the case, and suppose that what we're saying is that the head teacher then identifies under 10 or 15 children in that school in need that are not on free school meals, do they get extra funding to cover that, or is the funding set in stone now?
I think the funding's set for the 5 or whatever the year 2 is.
I think thanks, Chair. What we're working in is within a framework. The framework is based on the government's expressed desire to close the attainment gap in terms of poverty. It's not about reducing the gap between the lowest and highest attainers in our schools. It's about reducing the gap between the pupils who are deemed to be in most poverty and those who are not. That's how they've allocated the money. So that follows the schools that have the greatest levels of deprivation. But there is common sense surrounding it, which says you don't therefore have to only spend it on the kids who might be entitled to a free meal because they might be attaining very highly. But what schools will need to demonstrate overall, that they spent money in a sensible way that looks to provide more support for the more vulnerable. But I think they will be under a little bit of pressure to close the gap in terms of the kids who are seen to be in most deprivation. Does that make sense?
Just that I presume the money now is set in stone, and if there were identified other areas, then that won't get any extra finance.
Yeah, I think if you recall, when the attainment funding was announced, that was on the basis of SIMDs. I think something like 70% of the pupils had to come from an SIMD, and with the committee's agreement, I wrote to Angela Constance, who was Education Secretary at the time, saying that disadvantaged rural areas like our own, where we have a lot of kids who are in receipt of free school meals, but they don't live within a SIMD. And she said that she would
Thank you, Chair. Nothing to add to it at this point, but happy to take any questions on it.
Members? Oh, Jim?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's just on the appendix and the positions for this year as compared to where they were last year. Have they been decided on need? i.e. how much they actually need this work done, or is, if you actually look at the appendix, their position has been decided on how much it's actually going to cost?
The position of the schools initially was decided upon by using a condition survey which gave elemental ratings for roofs, external walls, windows, ceilings, those elements on an A, B, C and a D. They were then taken as a summary, giving them a total score, the score being on the right-hand column. So the school with the highest need in terms of what the condition surveys were saying were then at the top of the priority list. The reason for reordering them is the number of schools that have had elements of investment for condition C and D elements has moved them down the priority order, and through, I guess, in some locations, depreciation of the facility as well, that's brought them higher up the list as well.
Can I just come back and say thanks for the clarification, and I'm not complaining about the changes in position, considering every primary school in my ward has actually moved up the list.
That's a good result of the last meeting then. Jim McComb.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just surprised by the gap between the 2016 position for some schools and the 2017 position. For instance, the Douglas Ewart High School Block 1. In 2016, it was 12. And 2017, it suddenly goes to 51. Could you offer any explanation for these very wide variations from one year to the next?
It's a very good question, and similarly, when you look at Annan Academy Block 1, 2016 position was 62, 17's 5. Some of those schools have had significant investment, which has moved them a little bit around, but actually when we've gone into more intrusive investigations on those schools, we found a lot more detail about the investment requirement for them, and that's had a change on them. I think one of the hard things with the original condition survey in 2014, it was a snapshot across the service where the surveyors went round. They didn't do an intrusive survey just because of the time involved in dealing with that. So it was very much a visual inspection where we've had Clerk of Works or Property and Architectural Services supporting us with this. They've done more intrusive surveys that have given us a better idea of actually what's required in there. I think what's also worth adding is the condition surveys gave an indicative value of what financial investment was required to fix the schools element by element. What we're finding is that can be anywhere up to sort of 35–40% out in terms of required value. So there is always going to be a gap in what's been discovered through the original survey and actually the requirement when we get into closer into the investment for that school.
You would say, Lauren, that the 2017 figures are much more accurate. Thank you.
Ted?
Thank you, Chair. I was particularly pleased to see that Locker Briggs has achieved the #1 position, a school that's sadly been neglected. Have you any details on what is actually planned for that school?
Interestingly, we were there yesterday having a meeting with the head teacher to look at what the school's requirements will be moving into the future. I think it's a school that has capacity for 404 children, but there's a role just now of around 140. So that is going to have a significant influence on what the redevelopment of the school looks like. I think the first step that we're going through is creating an accommodation schedule for a school of that size, what that looks like, how that overlays over the existing footprint, and then from there that will define what happens to that school. I think ultimately it's a school that through being identified through the low utilisation, that there needs to be an alteration, a change there, and it might be a reduction of the actual floor plate for the school to use ultimately. I think we're at the early stages of that development just now, but I think probably in 6 months to a year's time we'll have made big inroads as to altering how that school works and flows.
Yeah, I think it's important to recognise that we've now got a proactive situation with regards to school upgrades, whereas when I first came onto this committee, or the education committee 10 years ago, it was very much reactive. You know, we didn't do the repair until the small repair to the roof until the roof effectively fell in, which wasn't the best use of resources. So I think we have now got a very good system in place in order to determine where we should invest the relatively small amounts of capital which we have for the programme. So I've got no additional speakers to comment. So can we move to the recommendations? Can we note 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3? Yeah. So if we move to item 6, which is on page 31, Early Learning and Childcare Planning for the expansion towards 1,140 hours by 2020-2021. This is an update. This is update number 1.
Okay. Thank you. Colleagues will be coming in to joining me in this because Liz Baxter and Rosemary Smith are the early years officers dealing with it. So I'll start off while they come in, if that's okay. Obviously, at the last committee, we did an update in terms of bringing committee fully up to speed on all the various work streams with the early years. Liz, I'm just going to start off until you get yourself comfortable. And we agreed that we would take at each committee as a standing item an update on this work. I just want to re-emphasise the very complex nature of this, and it does develop. It's obviously very important that we do communicate and we do engage. And as you can see, we've done a full and frank paper. Liz, do you want to summarise for the committee, please?
Can I just say, since we wrote the committee paper, we have received the indication of the funding. We received that yesterday. As Claire said, as Claire said, that we said we would come with an update, and the complexities of what we need to do now that we have the funding available. We need to look at we need to look at the workforce strategy, particularly, so that we are ready for 2020 with a workforce, using our providers, using our childminders, and having a flexible quality provision.
Okay.
It might be just worth talking through the various points because I know members are particularly keen, and obviously communities are particularly keen in relation to this. So as Liz said, we've just had the announcement, we've got the letter yesterday, and that letter will be drafted in terms of acceptance. And just to remind members, they're looking at giving us circa £900,000 for capital works and circa 600,000 for revenue. And that's particularly important in relation to the point that Liz has just made in terms of workforce planning. because we need to make sure we've got the workforce to deliver the strategies. We've obviously presented the early learning and childcare planning for that for your consideration, and looking about the procurement of the childcare services as well. I appreciate that is a key area and a very complex area, not only for procuring internally within the council, but in engaging partner providers to make sure they're part of this process and part of the delivery plan, because as we've said and we repeatedly say, they are key to delivering the strategy across the region. It's absolutely right that we have a bespoke model across the region to respond to the skill set that we have out there and to respond to the needs of the parents. We also highlighted that, and it was members charged us around the review of the 600 hours. I think that was key in terms of making sure that we learnt lessons and built on the good work that's been done there to deliver in the 1140 hours. And that work has started, and that report will be presented to a future committee date. In terms of the trials are going very well, and Rosie and Liz and the team are working well to deliver that and engaging, and some really good information which has been presented in the paper. And Lauren and the team have been working very carefully on the capital programme. In terms of the capital programme, for this initial phase, it has been prioritised on basis of what we think we can deliver in the first year. So for the clarity, the funding that we have just been announced is for delivery in 17-18. So we have to have that delivered for March 18. So we have to make sure we can deliver it. And as you know, with any construction or capital projects, there is in lead-in times. What we'd anticipate in future phases of funding and capital is that would be informed by the need for the childcare and what we have to make adaptations for. But we've assembled a full team here because we anticipate quite a wide-ranging questions on this very complex area. So that's why we've got 4 of us here.
Yeah.
Could I just get clarity on the confirmation of the funding again? How much capital and how much revenue was it?
So the letter that was issued was, it's the percentage of their overall amount. So it was our percentage of the £30 million capital. So that was 900, just over 912 capital. Yep. And then it was our percentage of the 21 million. So that was 638.
Is it enough?
Is it enough? Is it enough, and can it be delivered? They're the 2 key questions, and the team are working on that at the moment, because government have been clear in the letter that we've got to confirm whether we can spend it, and if we can't, there'll be reallocation for next year. So the team are just working on that. We have to put a letter back to government by the 28th of April to confirm that.
Gail?
Thank you, Chair. I think you almost answered one of my questions. Is it enough and can it be delivered? And I think the question at the moment is that we simply have no idea just now. When we rolled out the 600 hours, it was a challenge. We're going to nearly double that now. Do we actually have the capacity in the region to deliver that with all our partner providers and our own facilities? Will there be a penalty if we don't meet the delivery targets within the 12 months and then up to 2020? And my third question is, we've got 110 2-year-olds who are currently using a service through various sources. How does that stack up compared to other local authorities? Is it a good figure? Is it a poor figure? Are we promoting it enough? Are we targeting the right families? Because 110 doesn't seem like an awful lot to me for the whole region, but maybe it is quite a lot. I simply don't know. But as I say, I have worries about this. I'm not sure that we've consulted enough at this stage for us to be able to make some of the decisions and the recommendations. I think there's just too many unknowns about it at the moment. And while the report is very useful and I really appreciate the work you've done, I think that we're all left a little bit hanging at the moment. So this is going to be a massive challenge going forward.
Can I come in general terms first before passing over onto detail there? I think we do recognise the complexities, and I think it might even be quite unusual in a committee paper that we bring to you where that's the first point that's highlighted. So we do recognise those enormous complexities over the coming years. There is some uncertainty, and what we're really trying to do here is ask you to note those, but also to understand that we need to agree the overarching strategies we try to move forward, recognise that we don't currently have the capacity to deliver, but that we do need to agree some commissioning almost immediately, and we certainly have to agree that if we're able to spend that first 900,000, we would want to do so.
Anybody else want to add anything to it?
Rosie, do you want to speak against the comparison, the figures that Councillor McGregor was highlighting in terms of our averages?
Currently, we have 8.5% uptake 2-year-old provision. Don't have the information about how that compares with other authorities. However, we do need to work harder with our national colleagues to ensure that we're signposting eligible families to this. I believe that we have the capacity to deliver that service, but our uptake isn't as high as it perhaps could be.
Thank you for that, because I mean the whole point of the 2-year-old thing was early intervention and catching them at a very young age, and if they're in cluttered lifestyles and cluttered homes, getting them out into a more stable environment for a few hours a day and allowing the parents actually to develop as well. And it's disappointing that we're only at 8.5%. That's actually answering my question on that. So we maybe need a greater promotion of it generally.
I think I'd just say that's 8.5. We're aiming for 27% of the 2-year-old population.
It's obviously much easier to identify a 3- and 4-year-old rather than a vulnerable 2-year-old.
I would maybe just put on the record there that we're not necessarily at a disappointing number, because we'd like to compare that across other authorities. But we will do that as quickly as we possibly can. Okay.
In relation to other points you're raising there, we have done a very thorough exercise behind the scenes to say what is all the provision out there that we have access to, and working with partner providers to actually ascertain their full capacity. Now that's a big piece of work, and it's a huge change in culture, both for ourselves but also partner providers, to actually assess what they have got the maximum capacity to deliver, both in terms of what they've been registered for, but actually what the physical capacity is and staffing aspect. So there's a lot of work behind the scenes to help deliver this. We are clear from what we can see of the programme and the responsibility to deliver this for 2020. We must take advantage of the phase 1 to get a start on this. And there's 2 work streams in relation to that. You've got the facilities and the partner providers who've got the capacity, and it's an adjustment. So very simply, if somebody's delivering a morning session, then you can double it up and have an afternoon session, and then you're creating capacity through a staffing model, the revenue aspect. And then there's other aspects which Lara and the team have worked on in terms of what are the facilities we feel confident in making adjustments or creating, which are within our grasp. There is no known penalties, and the letter's very clear on that. If you can spend that, great. If you need to defer it a year, tell us now. Or if you want to spend more, I think our general sense is, and as I say, we're working as a team to deliver on this, is that we don't feel confident in suggesting to this committee that we'd be spending more at this stage. We feel reasonably assured we can deliver a programme to meet the funding that we've got, but we need the time to verify that. What we're doing is presenting to members today what we believe the first phase should be, and we're working closely with services colleagues to see how could we deliver this and what cost it'll be, so that by the 28th of April we have a robust letter which Colm and the Chief will have the relevant site of, so that they've got reassurance that we can do it. It is a tight programme, but we welcome this initial phase of funding to start it, and we also welcome the fact that we have got a phased approach over a number of years to deliver this programme. That is absolutely the right thing to do in terms of capacity planning and engaging in the model. What I also would say I think is advantageous in that approach is when you're asking parents now, the feedback we're getting is a lot is based on how their lives are now, or how they've been conditioned in terms of we're only entitled to that. We believe that as we work through this programme, more people become aware and adjust their lives because of this, the availability of this childcare arrangement. We fully believe that the uptake or demand requirements will change. So by having a phased programme, it allows us to develop it to meet the needs of the communities. It also allows us to work with the partner providers, because again, like everybody else, if you're asked something now, you'll probably say, oh, I don't know, or I'm not sure, I can't do it. But the ability to engage early over an elongated period of time allows us to develop and work on more robust solutions.
Willie?
Thanks, Chair. I'm looking at item 7 on the report that refers to the capital and moving towards meeting the commitment of the expansion of early and learning and childcare, etc. And it goes on to say early scoping work which has been undertaken indicates that meeting the demands of providing the 1140 hours based on our current provision would require an increase in capacity. And I relate that to 7.2, where there are 4 schools identified there. And maybe if I could address my questions to Claire and Lauren on this one. And I had a brief discussion with Father McFadden just before we came in, and we've got perhaps St Joseph's in Stranraer that's located in one of the oldest schools in the region, with very little capacity to take the kids on. They are going out to try and get the parents to direct their kids in terms of families and so forth to the school, and they have got transitional arrangements. But the capacity may not be in terms of the building, where in all the time I've known St Joseph's, and going back to what was the old annex in terms of a junior secondary, all that's happened there have been 2 toilet blocks put on it. But they do struggle for space if they're to meet this 1140 in moving forward. And the school always brinks on the 50 plus and slightly below, but to maintain the school to the standard that it has reached now, they do see that as a lifeblood in terms of the kids. Has that been looked at?
Okay.
So from a physical perspective, St Joseph's is not allocated to a nursery provision, but what I would say is we absolutely take the point on board that we've looked at all spaces across all schools, so we're not just limiting ourselves to saying, right, okay, the first 4 that you see here do have nursery provisions. So going back to the point we're making to say we believe there's less risk in deliver those because it's established provision, and we can expand that through a programme that Lauren's developed. But we have looked at every bit of estate to say, do we have capacity in other schools, but also in line with what are our partner providers available to deliver, so that we're not providing everything within our space.
Lauren?
I think I would add to that, the schools detailed in the document, they, as Claire mentions, they have existing nurseries. They also have capacity within the footprint currently, so they are the obvious choice for phase 1. I think we almost need to bring to this committee a hierarchy of where we should be considering for expansion to 1140. I think in terms of how that might look, it could be schools with existing nurseries that have capacity in the nursery. It's very easy to make adjustments there, as Claire mentioned before. It's going from a morning session to a morning and an afternoon. And then it's looking at schools that have a nursery, have capacity within the school through the low utilisation. Then it's looking at schools that there's demand for a nursery to be established there, and a process of identifying where the easy wins are to start with. So St Joe's may come along as part of phase 2, maybe phase 3, maybe phase 4, as a location that requires it, but that'll work its way through the system.
Yeah, could I just come back and I hear what both are saying and recognise what they are saying, but you know, St Joe's is 7th on the list of the previous report, and one of the issues that they suffer from is the lack of space in terms of developing what is their transition, where they do it on 2 days a week, and you know, it's the faith school that provides for the whole of the Rins area, and would dearly love to have the scope to provide a full-blown nursery, and I would hope that we do keep it in focus and that we do consider it either on phase 2 or whatever, if not in phase 1 as a priority.
Andy?
Thanks, Chair. I know it's an update report, but it's actually asking more questions than it's giving answers. And I think, as you're rightly saying, the very first thing we're going to be asked to accept the recommendation is the complexity and the associated risks. I'm sorry, there's 2 meetings going on here and I can't. Thanks. What I'm looking for here, I think, is we need much more meat in the bones here before we can do too much more. And I appreciate there are some timescales and stuff like that. For example, the multi-year spending profile that we're asking for, are we doing something similar ourselves right this moment in time to see what we think the spending profile is? Because there's no point in going to the Scottish Government asking them if we don't have a clue what we're going to ask them for. Right? The other bit, I'm just working my way through it, and I'll maybe get a pen and a bit of paper here, Claire. The bit about the procurement, I think, is welcomed generally by providers because it gives them security. I would suggest as well as a way. I think what we do, we need to be absolutely clear, and we need full cooperation of all the providers before we reach that. It's quite worrying when you read one sentence on page 33 that officer will be sharing the strategy and inviting comment from the private and voluntary sectors through the childcare partnership. Surely they should be involved in the planning process before it's written, right? Not after it's written. I could go on. I think the other bit, and I'm in some respects, I'm pleased the trial has been taking place at Newton Stewart, but I note right from your report there is no private sector input. It's not for profit through SPPA or what used to be SPPA and the school. There may be some childminders, but you know, if we're going to have a pilot, we should be looking at the whole mixture we have with the providers in early years, and that has to include the private providers as well as the not-for-profit or third sector, whatever you want to call them. Right? So common sense tells you, right, they should all be around the table. Right? So, and until we get assurances that they're all been around the table, they've all been listened to, right, they've all had their input, then it's dangerous for us, I would suggest, to actually move this too much further forward. And when it comes round to it, I think we should maybe postpone this to the next meeting of the Civil Committee to get an update. With similar meeting the bones.
Can I just make a comment before allowing the team to answer? This is more or less a standing item on the COSLA executive group. One of the things which comes through from all local authorities is the lack of detail in terms of what the Scottish Government are expecting us to do. It's a very ambitious plan to more or less double the amount of preschool childcare of what we have at the moment. We don't know how much it's going to cost, what the revenue implications are. They're talking, can I finish? They're talking about having to employ 18,000 additional fully trained staff. You know, what we would want is quality childcare at the end of the day. We don't know what they're looking for in terms of flexibility, in terms of hours, etc. So a lot of the uncertainty is coming from the Scottish Government because they can't actually tell the local authorities what they're looking for. So I think we're dealing with a very uncertain policy, which we're having to implement within 3 years, which is an exceptionally tight timescale. But I'll let the others come in on the back of your comments. Yeah, then you can come back after that.
Okay, because I'm agreeing with what you said, right? I'm just asking, I'm saying is we need some time here, we need some meat in the bones before the officer answer, right? And I think that's probably the thrust of what I was trying to say there. Yeah, and I understand, I totally accept, right? There's huge unknowns in this. Right? It is a leap in the dark, right?
Claire?
Okay. We take on board everything constructively and we welcome Councillor's challenge on this. We are very clear about doing a whole life modelling in terms of the capital cost and revenue implications in every aspect of here. We have gone through every aspect of our estate, what our service delivery is, to see how we can deliver it with our partner providers in line with the legislation that we must deliver to 2020. As you've just discussed there, this is not a programme you can deliver over 12 months, and we need to start working it now if we're going to meet the legislative requirements. I agree, there is work in progress. As I said before, that allows us the opportunity to develop as we find the developing needs of our parents. Our parents are limited in what they're saying and wanting now, but we fully expect, with the time and confidence and maturity of this policy progressing, that they will want and demand more, and we want to work with them and partner providers in delivering to that demand. So we have got robust information which sits behind this. We have presented the strategy to this committee and to the last one that we had in terms of being clear that what we are delivering and how we're going to deliver it and our interpretation informed by partner choices. We do not delineate between who our third-party provider is. Now, whether that's a not-for-profit, whether it's a community management, whether it's private, they are our partner providers who help us to deliver on these policies. We have engaged and we have active dialogue with the organisations which represent all partner providers. Now, maybe there's individuals in that associations that don't feel they're properly represented, and happy to speak with them, but we do engage with the appropriate associations to make sure they're at the table and working with us on solutions. We do have a partner provider as part of the trials. Now, how you choose to delineate that, it's up to you, but we wouldn't do that because we value external partners being part of these trials to develop the solutions. And already we are learning a lot from it. They are learning a lot from it about what we have to do to deliver this. We are recommending a decision be made in terms of what facilities we invest in just now to develop and start delivering this very key service. It is a challenge, it is organic, but it's fundamental to attacking some of the issues that this legislation is intended to deal with in terms of the 2-year-old, disadvantaged, childcare, economic strategy. We are seeing the benefits, the green shoots in the Newton-Stewart mini-GAF model because people are engaged and we're starting to implement it. We've got the returns back in, we know what people want and they're getting implemented for this August. We've only been able to do that with trial funding. We can only go to the next stage by capitalising on the money that government is giving us. We need to do it now because we need a year to get this implemented. We have got to return the letter in terms of whether we want this money by the end of April. We know this is the last committee before we do that, so we desperately need this committee to make a decision on the items that we're proposing.
Chair, if I could just add to that, I think again I'm maybe echoing Councillor Ferguson's comment. We're actually all agreeing on this. I think everybody's agreeing. It's quite a lot of uncertainty over the next 3 years. That's been highlighted very clearly here, and we've got a clear plan about how to develop around some of that uncertainty and make it more certain, engage with the government, get more certainty, engage with partners. But really the key issue here is that what we're recognising is that there is nearly £1 million in offer in terms of capital for next year, and those authorities who accept that will spend it. Those authorities who might decide it's too uncertain and delay will probably lose that money to other authorities. We have a view that it makes some common sense within the overarching strategy to spend the money as identified in 7.2. We think we can do that, but we certainly, what we're saying to you and advising is there's a significant risk of therefore losing the 900,000 capital if we don't take that today.
Andy, you want back?
Thanks, yeah. Just to do with the capital bit, is that purely the school estate, or can it be used for the provision?
As it's defined, it can be used for a number of different solutions, so we can be flexible on it. The initial approach has been to focus on the school stakes when we know we can deliver it. But again, the group is discussing about saying how could that capital be used in other ways to deliver the same output.
George?
Yeah, firstly, as a parent representative, I commend the proactive effort you're putting into it. There's obviously a lot of work being done here, and it's proactive ahead of the curve. So, well done on that, and well done on the report. I would like to move away a wee bit from the structures and more look at the people. I'm encouraged to see that you've got a particular profile on the workforce. And as a parent, what they need to be confident is that the workforce, that the staff in nurseries, whether they're private or at school, are qualified and able and get good leadership. And that'll be key to the parent having confidence in this going forward. So you have identified that. The question I would ask is, are the college aware of the requirement for more qualified people coming through? And secondly, this is not new, the private and the public providers, there's a need for them to work more closely together in our view, and particularly in terms of transition into school and things like that. So if we've got issues with that just now, then probably it's time to really look at them just now and make sure when we expand the service that there's a real partnership there to make sure that whether the children are at nursery when they move into P1, there's a good transition, whatever provider they're working with. So it's two questions really, and I think you're nodding that the colleges are aware of the requirements, and secondly, going forward, there needs to be a really good partnership between all the providers so that the parents can be confident that wherever they live in the county, there's an option there that's good and high quality.
Okay.
Yes, the college are, and the team are actively working with the college and planning and already started on that. And government did initially allow 31 million to come out. They reduced that to 20 million to come to the local authorities, but gave 10 million to the college directly, so that was taken into account. And absolutely noted in terms of public partner working, I absolutely agree with you in terms of transitions, and certainly Rosie and the team are mindful of that and actively encourage it.
Colin?
Thank you, Chair. Just want to check something. I think it was about a couple of years ago or so this first came in a paper, and it was the 2-year-old nursery provision, but the criteria was that both parents had to be unemployed. Is that still the case? And my other point, and it was actually pointed out by Gail here, that 1,140 hours works out about 6 hours a day per child during term time. I mean, to me, I've got a 3-year-old granddaughter. I would not like to see her at school 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. I mean, that's an awful long time for a young kid to be away from their parents.
Just to say, around the models for the trials, what we're seeing is that parents are beginning to uptake more hours in terms of up to 1,140 hours over the year, but not necessarily their full entitlement. And we're still, within the trials, we're working within the framework of up to a maximum of 8 hours. So some are using a couple of days in nursery, for example, and other parents are just choosing to uptake some additional hours. And I think that's why the consultation with parents is key, to ensure that we are taking cognizance of what they're asking, telling us that their needs are. And as Claire was saying, I think as we progress, and certainly as we learn, as we progress through the trial, it will be interesting to see that potential movement from what parents know and what they're comfortable with, and that move away from sessional nursery in terms of attending for a morning only or afternoon only. Over the last wee while, we've had uptake with parents opting for a back-to-back model, so that some parents are beginning to put their children into nursery for full days. But this is about offering them choices, accessibility and flexibility to meet the needs of the family. The eligible 2-year-olds, it is a number of benefits which are available on the council website. I haven't got that with me, but there's a range of working tax credits, for example, free school meal entitlement.
So can I just clarify that they've actually have to have free school meals or be on some kind of tax credit or be unemployed? The criteria was both parents had to be unemployed. That was the criteria when it was set out. I'm just asking, has that changed?
I'm not aware that has changed. Still the criteria.
But we will provide that information for you, Councillor.
Because if it is still the same, my point of view is exactly the same as it was 2 years ago or whatever, that it's the people who are working that are struggling to find childcare. Some of them are just like, I'll take my own daughter, for instance, she's in tax credits, barely makes ends meet, her and her partner both work. It seems crazy to me that unemployed people are getting free childcare when they're sitting at home, basically could be looking after their own kids, and the people who need the 2-year-old childcare are getting nothing, and it's them that basically fund it through their taxes.
At the end of the day, it's a government decision as to the qualification, but can you send the clarification out to all members? Get it. Ted?
Thank you, Chair. Some of the questions I was going to pose have already been posed by others, but this is an extremely ambitious programme, and I welcome that. I think it's a great thing that this initiative has come forward. You mentioned some figures there about 18,000 people, you know, having to be employed to implement this scheme. How does that relate to Dumfries and Galloway? You know, do we have an idea of that?
We will have a better idea once we have completed the full consultation.
So you don't have an idea?
So we've done some initial work in terms of whole life modelling and making some assumptions to say if we're going to expand it by a certain item, like we double like a morning and afternoon, we started doing some modelling around that. We can get the figures off the spreadsheet and share that with you, it's not a problem, but we've got some high level figures of what we anticipate would be the workforce requirements. But as Liz is saying, as the consultation comes back, we fully expect that to get defined each time because we're making assumption on what parents want at the moment. But as the consultation and requirements come back, we'll keep fine-tuning it, but we can share that high-level figure with members to say the number of anticipated additional persons that we're going to need it.
Yeah, thank you.
Jim McComb.
Thanks, Chair. Looking at 7.2, the 4 schools in phase 1. One of these is Gatehouse, and it states refurbishments will take place. My understanding is that there has already been a significant amount of refurbishment in Gatehouse.
Absolutely right. There has been on 2 counts. The nursery at Gatehouse was improved through the 600 hours funding that came down, and also additionally the school itself had a refurbishment of some description. In this case, Gatehouse, without looking to go into too much detail, there's not a huge amount of alterations needed at Gatehouse. Looking at the demand for the numbers, it's looking like there's going to be around maybe another 10 to 15 places required there. There aren't many third-party providers around that area, so it feels as if the demand needs to be met within the school. So actually, the additional floor space at Gatehouse is minimal from that perspective.
Alison.
Thank you, Chair. I have a couple of specific points. First one, on page 33, the 4th bullet point down refers to the need to require a significant investment in upskilling staff. My question is, does this apply to both commissioned providers as well as council staff? That's my first question. Second one relates to page 32. We have a paragraph regarding provision for 2-year-olds, and the second bullet point, small bullet point below that, refers to the criteria for offering places. What puzzles, I can't get my head around this, there is only one group provider offering places and the school nursery has 40 or more places. Does that mean if the school nursery is full up, or I have questions in my head about the necessity to avoid duplication. So these are my 2 questions. Thank you.
Right, second point first. So I appreciate the language is maybe a little bit clumsy around there, but what it's trying to say is that provision for 2-year-olds will be developed in a local authority of school, but only, because we don't want to take work away from partner providers, only if the school's the only provider, or that there's only one other partner provider in the area. So if there's not the capacity in the area, we will look to develop that capacity. And your other bullet point was bullet point 4.
Regarding investment in upskilling staff.
Yeah, so we're going to have to look at it from both sides and making sure that you might get trainees coming out of a college through a childcare course. You know, they could go to public sector or they could go to private sector, so the work that we're doing should benefit both sides.
Andy?
Thanks very much, Chair. Let me back in. I'm at 8.3. I'm actually really pleased because this is connected to the next item on the agenda. I would suggest, you know, that they're closely linked. And I'm pleased that we're recognising the need for adult learning, for improving the current levels of staff, being right across the whole provision of childcare. So that's actually really quite impressive, I have to say, and welcome. I've got a kind of technical question, probably clear for Claire. At 3.2.2 in procurement, does that include the local authority nurseries as well? Should we be procuring from our own nurseries? Because the reading of it says that we should all be in the one boat. The school nurseries.
Interesting interpretation of that paragraph. But as far as I'm aware, because we're delivering it within our cohort, within our service, that there's not that same requirement in terms of a commissioning or procurement process.
We respect, no, it's something you were delivering. The extra childcare hours is something you were delivering. Right? This is the new strategy, and that's the reason. So it's the childcare element as opposed to the early learning element I'm talking about here. Okay.
What I would say is it's captured in legislation, so as much as it's our legislative responsibility to provide primary and secondary education, it's now our legislative responsibility to provide 1140 hours. So it's something that is delivered within our body and our organisation. It's only when we have to go to a third party, then we have to go through the procurement commission process.
As I say, Gail.
Thank you very much for your indulgence. I promise I'll be quiet for the rest of the meeting. The debate's sort of brought up more questions from me than answers, which is quite a good thing, I think, because it is a very complex issue. And there are a huge amount of unquantifiables. I kind of agree with Colin. I would never have sent my 3 kids to nursery for 6 hours a day during term time. I wouldn't have utilised it 50 weeks of the year. I might have used about 6 hours a week, for each child. And I think this is going to be the difficulty. It's understanding what demand we're going to have. And I do wonder if we maybe should be looking at another pilot in maybe a slightly more urban setting than the Newton Stewart area, because I think what we do need to understand is what parental choice and the uptake is going to be. That's going to be absolutely crucial. Because say I would not have utilised it, absolutely would not have, but I appreciate that a lot of families will. And if we don't begin to get an average over the next year or two, as we build towards 2020, we're not going to know what capacity we need. And the other challenge as well, as Andy's pointed out, is some families can choose to use term time for the 6 hours a day, and that's fine. They can have it out over the 50 weeks in the year. How do we manage that as an authority when our schools are shut during the summertime and during holidays? There is just so many questions unanswered at the moment, and I just think you've just got, kudos to you all for what you've done so far, but you've got a huge amount to climb yet.
I think what I would say there is yes, absolutely. There's so much uncertainty. We need to work our way through it and through common sense. The youngsters who will be 2-year-olds in 2020 are currently twinkles in their mum and dad's eyes. We need to remember that. So it is very difficult to say right now exactly what parents will want in 3 years' time. And so that it's an evolving process that we need to work our way through. There's no other way around that. We can't possibly have all the answers for 2020 just now. We can make common sense decisions about phasing, and we can make sure that we've got the right sort of pilots and consultations set up and take it through from there.
Okay. What I'd maybe suggest is see this next phase as the next set of pilots that we will engage and inform what we've found. Because what's been quite interesting out in Newton Stewart is that parents have not wanted the 50-week year option as we thought they might have wanted. And actually a lot of it's just about elongating the day slightly. And what I think we'll find in the next phase is actually what Newton Stewart want is not what Castle Douglas or Gateshead want. And we have to keep rolling this out to meet the needs of that local community. And the way to do it is to drip feed these projects through. We consult locally, it forms a final solution, we get it in place.
Yeah, it is very, very complicated. It's obviously been drawn out through this discussion. What we want is good, high-quality childcare and early learning. It's not just a question of bringing youngsters into a room for 30 hours a week, which is a long week. But I wouldn't like to do 30 hours a week now, must admit. But that's the entitlement. It's up to the individual parents whether they fully utilise it or not. And I know it's been introduced in England already, and it's run into a number of problems in terms of the amount of money which the UK government's putting in to fund this, and a number of the partner providers, I think, have now withdrawn from the scheme itself. So we need to be very, very careful of this, and need to make it clear to the government that they need to fully fund this and take into account the living wage, etc., in terms of employing staff, which is very important. So that's why we've asked for a regular update on this to come to civil committee, because we don't have a great deal of time to get this in and get it right for the youngsters. Okay, so can we move to the recommendations? Can we note 2.1? Can we request 2.2, request a multi-year spending profile from Scottish Government to mitigate the risks of delivery by 2020? Yeah. Can we agree 2.3? Yeah. Can we note 2.4? Andy, you want
I'm happy to go down through these agreements, Jeff, if we get the directors' agreement that will be the fullest engagement with all the stakeholders. I think we need to get that on record, right? You know, this is no an aspersion being cast against any of the officers. We need to put it in record that there'll be a full engagement with everybody who's concerned in this. And if that was in, I'm happy.
Yeah. Happy with that? Do you want that? Yeah, I was going to say, do you want that actually written into the wording? Yeah, okay. Yeah. Lucy, would you like?
Through your chair, I would suggest the following words. We agree the strategy for early learning and childcare and planning for the expansion of 1,140 hours by 2020 as detailed in paragraph 3.2, and perhaps with the suggestion, subject to the director's agreement, that there will be a full engagement but with the all partner providers. Partner providers, parents and stakeholders.
Okay, so moving on, can we note 2.4? And can we agree 2.5? And 2.6, note the progress of the planned trial in the Sederunt area. And 2.7, agree the first phase of the capital programme. Thank you.
I just want to say one thing. I appreciate it's probably the last point I can do. I just want to say thank you as a committee. Thank you for all your challenge and hard work and guidance and direction over the periods. It is appreciated, honestly, so thank you.
Okay, members, can we move on to item 7, supporting lifelong learning service review? Obviously represent a massive piece of work on behalf of the officials within the department. We've got Stephen and Richard to speak to this. Anything you want to add to the report?
Just very briefly, Chair, if I may. Good morning, members. As you said, it's been a significant piece of work and I guess forms a bit of a milestone because it's the last service review I think that will be brought forward to members as part of the previously agreed suite of documentation that was approved. The paper considers the varying and different activities and functions within lifelong learning across the council, as detailed in the report. And I think in terms of a high-level summary, members, we've identified a number of areas of duplication. We think there are opportunities to provide these services in a more efficient, effective and economic way. The evidence is that the services are delivered based on, in some areas, based on historical programs as opposed to community need. We need to be more focused around the council priorities and targeting our most vulnerable communities in terms of the services that we deliver moving forward. So the report presents the way forward as a two-phased approach. Stephen and I will be happy to pick up any questions specifically in regard to either of those phases, but it very much is about the focus on delivering more integrated services moving forward in a more efficient and an effective way. So very happy to take questions, Chair, through yourself.
Thanks, Richard. Members? Andy?
Try to tell me something, Jeff. Chair, thanks for letting me in. I have to say it's a fantastic piece of work, and I think it's not a drawback. The other thing will be is how we actually communicate this, right? Because in some areas, if we change the way things are done, that's seen as something getting withdrawn rather than being done in a different way. So I think we need to be really careful in the way that we market this and take it forward. But I have to agree, I can't find a single thing in this that I would disagree with, I have to say. It complements the earlier thing we discussed. So, yeah, well done.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor, for your comments. Recommendation 2, and it picks up on what your concern was there in terms of communication, that we want to be very careful that we're building in time over the next 6 to 9 months to change the resource, make it more targeted, but then work with the individuals and groups who might see a shift in terms of signposting to third sector or other agencies. So we'll be very, very careful during that period that messages are going out with our customers and our partners to make sure that there's that's mitigated as best as possible.
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly, and in addition, just in terms of communication to elected members, that the next agenda item presents the team plan for the wellbeing part of lifelong learning and wellbeing. I would see the outcomes, if they're approved today, from this piece of work featuring in the lifelong learning team plan, which will be subject to presentation and approval of this committee and scrutiny from elected members moving forward.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think communication is going to be vital in this, and it's quite obvious there's a lot of work being done into it. The one thing that we will need to be playing on is 4.3. It gives the initial saving of 40,000 would be achieved through this model. And on the appendix at 129, it says realign services within one function and generate savings of 40,000. And it's the benefits is resources more effectively utilised. We will have to make sure, and I hope you're going to confirm, that it is effectively utilised the same amount of staff as what we've got at the minute, because there's nothing in there that says that the 40,000 that you're going to save isn't going to get rid of a member of staff. The report doesn't say that, but it also doesn't say that you're not going to do that.
Thanks, Chair. As part of the disaggregation of community learning and development as well, we've been looking at moving from an area model to a more region-wide model, and the feedback from staff, certainly on the adult learning side, has been they've really welcomed that approach and coherence. In terms of the 40,000 that's been identified, that is being met through an ERVS that's already agreed and will take place from the 1st of April. So it's all mitigated within that.
No one else indicating they wish to speak, so can we move to the recommendations? Oh, sorry. Can we move to recommendations? Can we note 2.1? Note 2.2? Can we agree 2.3? Agree 2.4? And can we agree all those within 2.4, it's detailed within that? Yeah. And can we agree 2.5 over the page? Okay. Once again, thanks for all the work that's been put into this tome. Right, so if we move to item 8, which is on page 137. Which is the Wellbeing Teamwork Plan 2017 to 18. And I think Lee's speaking to this, or Richard.
Again, just a very brief introduction, if I may, Chair. As I said previously, members will recall the previous work plan on young people that was presented to this committee in December. This is the second one of the Lifelong Learning and Work and Wellbeing team, the Wellbeing team plan. Delighted that Lee, the Manager for Wellbeing, and Catherine McElraith, Consultant in Public Health, who has been working with us on the joint health and wellbeing element of the wellbeing agenda, are here to answer any detailed questions that members may have. But other than that, Chair, I think we go straight to questions, and we're happy to pick up the detail through that.
Okay, members? Andy?
Can we just make sure when one of the partner organisations closes down a committee that they tell the members of the committee not to turn up? I think Richard knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Richard?
Yeah, I've noted, Councillor.
The Public Health Committee was closed by the NHS and we didn't know anything about it.
Jim?
Thanks, Chair. How does this work relate to the Building Healthy Communities initiative? Does it dovetail with that?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the Building Healthy Communities is now controlled through the NHS locality teams in the 4 areas, which is separate to the public health team. But there is a clear partnership that exists within the NHS health and wellbeing specialists that we work closely with, and the resources that the locality teams in the NHS have got. So there are a number of initiatives within here that we are able to draw on the Building Healthy Communities resources to help implement in those locality areas. So we certainly have that close link.
So, is there still a danger of unnecessary duplication?
I don't believe so, Councillor. The team plan that we've got here has been shared across the not only the Public Health Directorate, but the wider NHS colleagues in terms of agreeing the outputs that we have got here. Those have been influenced not only by the resources that we have within SIPL, the resources that the Public Health Directorate offer in, but where those 2 agencies together draw on, for example, Building Healthy Communities, or for example, some of the other clinical input, they've all had a view on this plan.
Andy?
I think, if I'm getting this right, Lee, this is to make sure that there's an overlap between what the Integrated Joint Board are doing. Am I right? Because a lot of this should be getting delivered by them or under their auspices. Yet, the only part in the Dumfries and Galloway, of course, is children and families. Right? That isn't into the scheme. So, is this primarily to make sure that that has a mirror effect to the one that's in place for the Integrated Joint Board? Because I can't see any mention with the IGB here at all, unless I've missed it. Just need a bit of clarity, I think, is just where does it fit into the locality plans for the IGB?
Right. Okay, thank you, Councillor. And certainly if Catherine has anything to offer from public health side, then I'm sure she'll come in at the end if required. Right, first of all, the purpose and premise for doing this joint plan, we've had a joint health and wellbeing unit between our council and public health for several years now, since 2011, and the partnership has worked well, but it has worked well working on their own individual plans for those individual services. So the council have still had their one and public health have had their one. So first and foremost, we've agreed where we've got shared outcomes that for the first time in the 4 or 5 years of the joint unit, that we put them together in one plan. And that's certainly helpful for the team that I look after, the team I'm sure that Catherine's responsible for. But importantly, there are a lot of the areas of health and wellbeing that neither Catherine's public health team nor our council resources will directly deliver. We need other partners to contribute to that. Health and wellbeing responsibility across our schools and young people is a responsibility for all, so we do draw on other partners. In terms of the integrated joint board approach, I can give the example in relation to our future plans for physical activity and sport. Part of a restructure that we're looking at within there is to focus much more closely on those health and social care locality plans, because we identify that that's something we haven't been tagged into well enough previously. The council resource that contributes to the DG Health and Wellbeing currently sits within SIPL. Some of that resource is transferring to the IJB. That's part of a previous decision. So we're currently taking advice on whether the Wellbeing team plan, as it stands just now, is something that we should be presenting at IJB for their noting as well, and we're just seeking guidance on that.
George? Darren has just informed me this is an education, so unfortunately, although you listen, you can't actually speak to it. Gail?
Yeah, I said I wasn't going to speak, but anyway. Page 103 of 146, it's got the wage bands, the employability and skills posts. Doesn't make an awful lot of sense to me that we have an employment development officer, one full-time equivalent, one post on band 11, earning 9,000 a year. And, oh, sorry, my apologies.
Willie?
Yeah, Chair, I'm looking at page 142 of the report that refers to physical education, physical activities and sport, and then goes on to talk about mental health and well-being. The very first bullet point on 142, increase the quality and range of opportunities for physical activity before school, after school, and during lunchtime. And I've worked closely with Lee in terms of delivering some of these after school, not only in sport, but social activities, cinema and so forth. I would hope that we do roll out, and Ronnie made available the 500,000 for accessible schools, accessible play parks, where there is a high degree of physical activity for kids who suffer from mental health issues, autism and so forth, and likewise in terms of their disabilities, that we see this rolled out as quickly as possible so that we deliver some of the innovative work that's been going on. I can speak in terms of Stranraer to deliver what would be the most innovative play park for kids with physical and learning difficulties, some with mental health issues.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Scobie. Noted and certainly been in regular contact. Very much a priority for us within the reference you've got there is in relation to our Active Schools Community Sport team and the activities, including the disability sport officers we have, very much within the team plan of those dedicated officers. We have a range of before school, lunchtime and after school projects specific to those disability sport programmes. And I'm aware of this funding in terms of the accessible play parks, and happy to pick up discussions with the communities team as best we can to support that process.
Yeah, I think the formation of the CIPL committee and speaking to officers throughout the new remit, I think they've actually found how beneficial it is in terms of how they can all input into it. And it's much more focused than probably was in the past, and a lot more opportunities in order to use the resources which we have to deliver the services for the people who use it. So I don't have anyone else wishing to speak. So can we move to the recommendation to approve the Wellbeing team work plan? I've got no further business except to say I've really enjoyed chairing the education committee and the CIPL meeting. Committee, I think we've made a lot of progress over the last 3.5 years. At a time where finances have been very strained, I think we've got much more focused organisation at the end of it. So thank you all, and thank you all, the officials and everybody else who's been involved in this. Thank you.